started writing Ethereum in December. I had £500 left. My rent was £500 a month. At that point, I've done 2 startups. Neither of them seem to be doing anything. I'm just gonna get a job at a bank. And then he offered me £1,000 a month to just carry on doing Ethereum. I wanted to see if this white paper could work, so I started coding it. A few months later, I was the co-founder of Ethereum.
Gavin Wood, the co-founder of Ethereum, creator of Polkadot, and the visionary behind Web3.
He's here to unveil the secrets shaping the future of blockchain technology.
You created the Ethereum Virtual machine and you also founded Polkadot. What is Ethereum's biggest achievement to date?
Ethereum made the most millionaires of any project in the history of the world.
How do you come up with a big idea?
An idea is where you actually have a path.
Honest take on meme coins.
It's bullshit.
What is Polkadot's biggest achievement?
Delivering a secure, sharded blockchain.
What's the biggest problem with Polkadot today?
The fact that it's sharded. My childhood wasn't the easiest childhood in the world. I can probably identify with childhood trauma.
Do you want to elaborate a bit more?
I grew up with a single parent. My mother had an abusive husband. I do have very strong memories from that era of life, of essentially abandonment. It gave me a strong gratitude for a safe environment.
Gavin, being too far ahead is the same thing as being wrong. You're an inventor, very early to trends. How much have you suffered in life from being too early or completely misunderstood by other people?
Was it really Howard Marks that said that?
75% of you that watch this channel frequently do not subscribe. If you like this show and think it provides value to you in your crypto investing journey, can you please do me a favor and subscribe to this channel? Hit the like button and leave a comment below. It helps this channel more than you can imagine. The bigger the channel, the bigger the guests, and the better the conversation. Thank you. This conversation is supported by Jupiter, the most used decentralized trading platform on Solana and the largest DAO in the world. Sui, a scalable layer 1 blockchain that's fast, secure, and affordable, built by previous Facebook developers, and that delivers the benefits of Web3 with the ease of Web2. And Mental, an Ethereum layer 2 that built 2 products I particularly like. FBTC, which enables you to borrow and lend Bitcoin in DeFi, and METH or METH, one of the largest ETH liquid staking protocols that, by the way, just launched its token called Cook. Thank you so much for doing this, Gavin. We are drinking some Japanese whiskey.
Yeah, Yamazaki 12.
Because I learned that you like whiskey and that you like Japan. Cheers.
Chin. Kampai.
You say kampai in Japanese?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was only in Chinese.
Definitely kampai, Japanese.
Do you speak Japanese?
No, but I know a little bit to get around.
Do you live in Japan?
I have a home in Japan now.
Why?
Just really like the culture. I mean, maybe not to live throughout the year, but it's a really unique culture. So very interesting to live there.
What do you like about the culture? It's actually very different from the rest of Asia.
I mean, the services are just incredible. There's so much consideration put into everything, and you can really tell.
Very different from the UK.
Yeah.
What do you think about the UK?
I mean, I grew up here. I'm British, so it's like a bit of a. I'm not desperate to spend all of my time here, but I have a home in Cambridge. I enjoy staying. I very much enjoy certain elements of British culture.
For example?
British Indian curry, very good. I like a nice pub, ale, cheese. So some of the cuisine, pies, always nice. Bit of fish and chips, Sunday roast, lovely. It's one of the more sort of polite mannered countries of the world, which is always nice.
It's nice, but when you're not from the UK and you're not like me, for example, I'm from Switzerland, you don't speak English natively, it's sometimes very hard to understand what they mean in terms of kind of humor, right? Very difficult, very different humor.
Yeah, I think humor is a great way of communicating. And it's you often find that there's a lot of meaning in jokes. Like some places, humor is just part of the communication. It's like being somewhat indirect or reaching out to some sort of shared anchor point, rather than really trying to just drill in on the statement. Is just the natural way of communicating. I was told that this is the case in Japan, and that people from, I believe it was Osaka, but it might have been Kyoto, but definitely not Tokyo, are just naturally more humorous. Part of the communication that they do is just naturally humorous. And this is a little different when you're sort of born and raised in Tokyo and you go down there and everyone's a joker. It's a little different when, a natural part of communication is joking around for one person and maybe not so much for the other.
Do you think humor is more linked to culture or actual how smart someone is? Understanding humor.
So I think to a large extent, humor draws upon common anchor points, common perceptions, and a sort of very a common way of interpreting the world. So it's not necessarily kind of intelligence, but I think to some extent it can be, intelligence can be used as this sort of means of generating humor, of like generating this commonality between interlocutors. That humor, as far as I can tell, I thought about humor a little bit, draws upon the idea that if you make an utterance, if you say something or you do something, the person, the sort of target, will interpret it in two ways, and some other what we might call like public will interpret it only in one way. And this hidden interpretation is what gives rise to the fact that it's funny. And it's funny because the interlocutor, the target, understands that they interpret it in both ways, and that there are others that only interpret it in the one way. And because they know that, and because they know that the originator of the utterance knows that, there's like a sort of understanding, a shared understanding that is special. It's between them and it's not between other people.
You love to analyze a lot of things.
Sure.
Who are you?
This is the question that the Vorlons asked of Delenn in Babylon 5. It took an entire episode.
That's why I'm starting with that.
Yeah. I prefer the other question. What do you want? That was what the shadows asked of Delenn. Who am I? I don't know. I'm a bit of a free spirit. Try to avoid pigeonholing myself, and this is usually how one defines who one is. It's like, what is one's relations to the world around them, to people and institutions. But it's I don't like providing a simplistic answer to this question, because it's like, if people hear it, then they will inevitably read into this answer more than I really mean, because who a person is, broadly speaking, it cannot be summarized usefully in in a sentence or two. It's really something that you can only get by I don't know, I guess looking at what the person has said and done, and maybe some sort of interview like this.
What is your mission?
Well, I suppose what drives me. I don't know. There's a few different factors, a few different things that I want to achieve. I mean, happiness would be a nice one.
That's one of the topics of the day, actually.
Contentment. To be a good father. there's a sense of duty towards some of the things that I've been involved with, and this is a personal mission. And then there's a few sort of childhood ambitions and things that I know will be that I want to. I guess that I know will make me happy and might make other people happy as well. And this sort of more falls into art and music and so on.
You mentioned childhood ambition. I sat down with Kia Wang from Alliance DAO on this podcast a couple of months ago. And he told me that they're looking for two main traits to find and identify the big crypto founders of tomorrow. The first one is a certain degree of autism, which helps you think independently. And the other one is a sort of childhood trauma that gives you a chip on the shoulder, makes you want to prove something to the world. As a very successful crypto founder, can you identify with one or both of these traits?
Well, I'm not qualified to diagnose autism. But yeah, I mean, my childhood wasn't the easiest childhood in the world. So I guess I can probably identify with childhood trauma.
Do you want to elaborate a bit more?
So I grew up as with a single parent, just my mother, and my now this was to a very large extent her choice, but she had an abusive husband that was also my father for a number of years, and you know I don't think I ever got smacked around or anything, but I do have very strong memories from that era of life of essentially abandonment. And I don't know if I really could claim that this is a I don't know what specific trauma this falls into, if any, but it gave me I guess a gratitude for a safe environment, strong gratitude for a safe environment.
There's more and more, actually I talked with Jesse Pollack, Mike Novogratz, a bunch of people. There's more and more of trying to understand oneself and their kind of childhood, doing some sort of therapy to understand where some sort of patterns come from. So not only to explain, hey, this is the reason why I'm doing that, but it's more to basically self-improvement, which we all want to. Have you ever done anything like that? Thinking my childhood might be helpful for me in some ways, but also unhelpful in other ways, and therefore I want to learn more about myself.
I mean, yeah, I'm as you correctly determined not long ago, I'm someone who likes to think about things, like to analyze things. So it's not that I haven't thought very deeply about this stage of my life and how it can, how it might impact my thinking now or interactions. But if you mean, have I done any specific, I don't know, psychotherapy or hypnotism or something? No.
You're the co-founder of Ethereum. You created the Ethereum Virtual machine and the Solidity language, which is the programming language enabling smart contract developers to build applications on the top of Ethereum. You also founded Polkadot. How do you come up with a big idea?
Don't know. I guess they come up with themselves.
Interesting. So you don't need to do anything. Just comes.
Yeah.
Do you start with objectives and goals?
No.
Or just one day you wake up and you're like, that's the thing I have to do?
Sure. I mean, have to do is maybe pushing it a little bit, but yeah, I mean, one day I think about things. Maybe I go on a walk. Maybe I'm just thinking in the shower or something. I don't know. And the pieces, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe some people like Elon Musk like they decide, I want to go to Mars. And it's like, right, what do I need to do that? And I need to do this, develop batteries, develop rocket science, develop this and that and the other. And then they just set up a roadmap in their brain or on paper and just tick the boxes, right? Yeah, that's not really what my vibe is. I'm more of a, I guess, I'm more incremental. And it's not that I'm incremental in like, I avoid doing anything, significantly different, but it's incremental more in the sense that I take what I already know, and what I already can see working, and the components that I can sort of imagine existing or know already to exist, and I look for combinations of them that are that provide an outcome which seems positive, useful. And that, as far as I understand, has not been achieved before, in at least not in as good a way.
I read a book by Maxwell Maltz, the famous surgeon and author of Psycho-Cybernetics. So the book is called Psycho-Cybernetics, and it actually explains some part of the creative process, right? And that most of it is actually subconscious. So he says, when you do see a thing clearly in your mind, the creative success mechanism within you takes over and does the job much better than you could do it by conscious effort or willpower.
Mm-hmm.
How much is creating a big idea, like the EVM, for example, or any other big idea, from your conscious mind versus you have some sort of idea, you set some goals, you kind of sleep over it, and you let the subconscious mind do the work after thinking hard about that?
I mean, in my opinion, an idea isn't really... Like, I can have an idea, right? Like, end hunger in the world. And then I can sleep on it and, like... let my brain, let my subconscious do the work, and will anything happen in the morning? No, right? Because if you're talking about ideas as in visions or high-level goals, that's not really an idea, right? That's, I mean, maybe it's an idea for a film or something, but it's not like an idea in an engineering sense. And therefore, I don't really agree that the subconscious mind can particularly help in this regard. I think ideas must be constrained by practicalities. If you do not have the means of ending hunger, then there's not that much point in trying to ideate, trying to focus on an idea of ending hunger. Now you say, well, we'll take an incremental approach and we'll do this or that or the other. But I think much more... So, I mean, I think this approach implies a top-down thing where you have the end goal and you're trying to work down from the end goal to how you will achieve it. And as I said, I look at this as more of like an Elon Musk kind of a move where you actually, are a multi-decker billionaire and you can, I don't know, is he in the hundreds of billions now? I think so, right? And you can just command, like the president of the United States, right? Or the president of the Saudi National Fund, right? And you can just say, right, I'm going to build a city there. I'm going to spend $3 billion on eradicating malaria, right, from this place in the world. And then you treat it in a very much methodical, procedural, corporate, emotionless manner. And you work it all out, and you work out if the resources you have, can just be spent on achieving the outcome that you... The idea. But as I said, I don't think it's an idea. I think that's an outcome. An idea is where you actually have a path. You have a way of a means of achieving something. Now, maybe you don't know exactly what it is, but it's positive. It's probably going to be useful. It's probably going to do the world a favor. And you believe that no one has ever considered this invention or this way of combining things that you already have into something new. And I would say this is actually what most people, when they say, oh, an inventor had an idea, That's what they mean by the idea. They mean a recombination of
Something
basic
that exists
elements.
You're saying I combine these things and I think it's going to be useful to the world, right? The problem of that is, for the person who is like that, the inventor, is that people for some time, or maybe for a very long time, will not even understand you, right? I think it's Howard Marks who said, being too far ahead is the same thing as being wrong. You're an inventor, very early to trends. How much have you suffered in life from being too early or completely misunderstood by other people?
Well, probably a fair amount, but I don't know. I mean, is it possible to know when other people misunderstand you? I mean, is there an apparent difference between them misunderstanding you, ignoring you, or being too, or not being clever enough to, to be almost like kind of able to ever able to get the concept? I don't know. I suspect so, but. To some extent, I would agree with. Was it really Howard Marks that said that? Doesn't sound like him.
I'll double check later.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's if you are aiming to build something that has immediate value to the world, then yeah, you have to sort of explain it in terms that the world already understands. Which is why most radical new inventions are initially used for a ridiculous, naive use case, like making, the classic example being the internet being used for email. It's like, okay, you can now send messages instead of taking a day to arrive, they take a few minutes to arrive. It's like, assuming people check their inbox every few minutes. It's, the internet had a huge impact, and email these days accounts for a relatively minor part of that impact. But nonetheless, it was needed because people understood mail, and therefore they understood that if you can do mail but do it like an order of magnitude faster in terms of delivery, or 2 or 3, then that's obviously an improvement. So I would agree that, you do need to explain things in concepts, in terms relevant to the market or whatever that you want, the world that you want to attract. The problem is, of course, that sometimes building something is easier than working out what it's useful for.
That's the problem of most entrepreneurs, right? They're actually building a product to try to find an audience instead of the opposite. Am I solving a problem for people? But then you might also argue that the people who are building a solution for an existing problem, it's kind of, they're solving a smaller problem than something like a completely new invention.
Yeah, typically. And oftentimes they're constraining themselves. Like they're constraining their intellect and their intellectual space, because like they have a clear scope, and it's like, right, I'm only aiming to make this thing, a car, go faster or consume less fuel. And it's like, maybe they can think of making the car fly, but that doesn't matter because they're only concentrated on making it use less fuel. So I would agree that that you're probably going to solve smaller problems if you already pick your outcome before you begin the truly intellectual work of devising how to achieve that outcome. If you're a little bit more widely, like broadly scoped, if you're a little bit more laissez-faire on precisely what outcome you're aiming to achieve, like how you're trying to make the world better, just attempting to look for things that generally do things freer, better, faster, then you're probably going to hit upon something more revolutionary, more substantial, faster.
What's the moment that you felt the most misunderstood ever in your life? Because you said probably many times, right?
I mean, I get it quite a lot with Jam, you know, this new protocol I'm doing. But I mean, it's fair enough because I mean, it's a complicated protocol and it sort of does things in a different way, and it's not always easy to understand how the way is indeed different and why it's better. Largely because I think people haven't understood well the constraints of doing things in the present way. And I think this is like a big issue with working sort of on the edge of technology. People, it's not always very clear to people, even the practitioners, where the technology is, where the current sort of edge of technology is not really optimal. Like the problems. Until you sort of analyze and really understand the problems, it's not always so easy to understand why that a particular thing might be a solution.
How do you even start then? When you say, because again, if you have the classic approach, which is I have a problem, I'm going to solve this problem, you know where to start, right? But if you do something much more kind of abstracted, how do you even start?
So if you begin by saying, well, I have this problem, I'll look for a solution. I think this can work in for smaller incremental problems. I think for bigger problems, you're probably going to have to be an extremely lucky person to stumble upon a solution for a very big problem. Or you could be, a Bill Gates type and just say, right, I'm going to throw my personal wealth, which is substantial, at this problem, right? But assuming you're not extremely lucky or extremely wealthy, then you're probably going to only want to start solving the smaller problems because there's lots and lots more smaller problems than there are big problems. They're much more niche, nuanced. And therefore, there's not so many people focusing on them. Therefore, there's a greater chance that still lower-hanging fruit, that intellectually lower-hanging fruit that you are likely to find and be able to capitalize upon. So I think, this top-down outcome-first approach is probably much better suited to smaller problems than it is to bigger problems, unless you happen to be exceedingly well resourced or exceedingly lucky. And this is why I sort of say, you would probably want to begin by looking at like the situation as it stands, the components that you have, and reading, and when I say components, I mean it in a very abstract sense. So I don't just mean literally plug and play things like the Rust language or an Android phone or a CPU. I mean the various areas of mathematics, the various areas of engineering, various areas of human understanding of the world, as well as goods and services that are already being sold, as well as deployed projects, open source software, and all of this all together. So these are the components that you have to work with as someone that is attempting to build something. And looking at ways of combining these, along with probably a little bit of intellectual novelty, into something that can be useful, that might be able to be purposed at solving one or more outcomes, is, I think, really what it's about. And you can probably do this at a low level fairly easily. Like I can just write a new program that does, exchange pair matching and make a bot that, achieves some success after not that long, right? That's solving a fairly small problem. Academics, I think, work at a higher level of abstraction. They're still trying to recombine ideas, right, with a little bit of intellectual ingenuity, a little bit of innovation, but they're trying to solve bigger problems, in inverted commas, because they're not necessarily they're not problems that have necessarily been particularly they're not necessarily big problems that a lot of people know about, and they're not necessarily problems that are particularly useful to know how to solve. But nonetheless, they're creating more useful pieces of human knowledge, and this is in and of itself a useful thing. I mean, there's classic examples of this, of like the theory work that was done in the early 20th century that gave rise to laser theory that was ultimately utilized for CDs. It's like CDs couldn't have been invented without this work being done. But like when the work was done, no one actually knew what it was useful for. Like it stayed useless for decades before it was actually used. But when it was used, it was a revolution, audio technology. And this is like working at, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying you should, get up into your ivory tower and only do stuff that, is like high intellect work. But I'm saying that there is a spectrum between working on something that is immediately practical and working on something that is like not particularly, apparently purely theoretical. You can kind of, and this is sort of where I sit, like in this sort of middle ground where I'm trying to come up with sort of new engineering understanding that I'm not saying it's going to give a 10% improvement to transaction volume tomorrow or once it's deployed even, but rather that it could, if used properly, give 1,000 or 1,000,000% increase in transaction volume as part of a next generation system. You don't know for sure because you're not chasing that outcome so fervently. Rather, what you're doing is sort of chasing the intellectual understanding, because the assumption is that a much better intellectual understanding can itself generate great outcomes, and it can generate more than one great outcome.
Hey, when shift happens, family. Time to toast our partner, Gavin. They're taking luxury wine to the blockchain with their super fun concept called Uncork to Earn. Buy your favorite wines, enjoy unique experiences, and get an airdrop each time you open a bottle with your friends. Cheers to Gavin for bringing transparency, authenticity, and exclusivity to the fine wines industry. How do you find people who kind of support you when what you're trying to build is so kind of abstract? Especially when it's very early on in a trend.
There are a lot of people out there that just love building stuff. And I found this out actually when I put out the Jam Prize and managed to get like over 30 teams interested in building this thing. And it's like, you look at the grey paper, the Jam spec, and it's maths, right? It's formal language. And it's not easy stuff. And it's not even like that obvious that it's, kind of done some modeling, trying to work through what the numbers would be. But, there's no diagrams, there's no whizzy demos or visualization of how it's going to work. It's hard stuff to get into. And still, it seems people love the idea of actually just building it, of like being there, building something that is new, that has new innovation, has new technical foundations. So it seems at least that it's actually not that hard to find people to build actually new innovative stuff. What it's really hard, and I think Joel Spolsky, one of the essays that he compiled in some of his work on software theory, pointed out, was that it's really hard to find great people to maintain old and or shitty software. The one thing that great developers don't want to do is shovel other people's shit. So if it's a case of like greenfield development of something that is novel, I think you actually don't have too much problem finding people.
Do you have example of old
banking software? Right. So the banks still have software in ancient languages built in the 70s, and they're still looking for people to maintain this stuff. Like, thankfully for the practitioners of banking software, it's increasingly being rewritten. But I think you can still find some of the older banks that kind of have this core of whatever it is, COBOL 75 logic that's still actually running the banking stuff, that's got like something built around it and something built around that and something built around that in sort of in layers and layers outwards until you eventually get the modern software that's been written. All of them sort of trying to use the thing inside of them, but like not expose it. And avoid sort of exposing its flaws and try and make it go, sort of as fast as possible. It's an engineering mess, basically. But the banks pay enough to find people to
absolutely
maintain it.
Which are usually the people who are more interested by the money than by the innovation. So, yeah. You mentioned before academia and some sort of big progress in audiovisual, right? And your career actually started with a mashup of music and computer science. You did a PhD in music visualization. Mm-hmm. Why would a computer scientist want to visualize music?
I really love music. I love listening to music. And it's like, I'm not like synesthetic, but I was very interested in musical analytics, I suppose. Like, I've got an analytical mind, right? So I naturally, as I hear the music, I naturally analyze it. Like, it naturally breaks down into structure, pattern.
For example?
I mean, I can't.
What kind of patterns?
I guess repetition and evolution. So, a simple example would be like a verse-chorus structure. And it's like you got an intro, you got the first verse, then you got a chorus, maybe another verse-chorus, maybe a third, and then you got a bridge, and maybe a final verse, and then an outro. And this is if you're a music composer, this will just be second nature to you. If you're a practicing musician, like an instrumentalist, you'll probably know about it, but you're not like that focused on the structure. You're focused on making sure that you actually get the notes out in the right place at the right time, in the right way. If you're a listener, you probably don't care. You don't notice it at all. It's not something that most people at least think about very much. They just, they listen to the music, maybe they listen to the words, maybe listen to the instrumentation, but they're not like that interested in like analyzing the structure of the music. But for me, I kind of am. And I think there's probably some other people out there that are also interested, that, have maybe not quite as analytical minds as me, but still like kind of on the way. And I think, for them, maybe it's like they get pleasure through seeing the music before understanding the music in a deeper way. Because if you listen to it, it's not that easy to understand the structure. Like you have to kind of make a mental model, like mental checkpoints of what's happening in the music. And have there been 2 choruses or 3 choruses? And if it's a very complicated piece of music, then it would be very difficult to keep it all in your head. Very few people will be able to do that. But if you can see it, that's a bit different. And I think on a broader basis, a lot of people really love a more immersive experience. Like, one of the reasons that I go to see live music, and I presume other people go to see live music, is to see the players of the instruments moving as I'm experiencing the music. And it's like, wow, I can see the pianist, being much more aggressive, and the piano sound is much louder, right? And then and the piano sound is much quieter. I can see, as the drummer is tapping the drums, the beats are coming to me. There is this, and I think up until recorded music, this was just this is what you saw was what you heard, and there was just never any question about it. Then of course we have recorded music, and it's like you can hear it without seeing it, and I was born in this era, and so I don't question it. But maybe I should be questioning it, because it's not what people had up until whenever, the 40s or 50s. No, actually recorded, I guess, 20s. And I think it's a much fuller experience when you see the music in addition to merely hearing the music. Maybe it's not the most important part of the experience. Hearing is probably still the most important part, but like seeing it also adds to it. And so this was really what I was trying to do. It's like, can we create algorithmic ways of taking the actual the sound, the audio, and turning it into something that is readily familiar for a viewer, so that they can either look at an image and like see that from the image is the music and follow it along, or can we create some sort of animation or video feed that matches the music in some immediately tangible, perceptible way. Now you say, well, you've got Winamp plugin visualizations and whatever, and you've got this and that, and like lights, and the lights kind of move in line with the bass beat. It's like, yeah. I mean, I looked at all of this, and it honestly, it's like, most of the time, the visual artist listens to the music, gets a feel for the music, and then makes some visual art that is not particularly, I mean, it's their own interpretation, perhaps, but it's like a very high-level interpretation of the music. To me, it's all very well, and if I like the visual artist, maybe I'm going to like the visual art that goes along with the music. But it's a little bit like wine pairing for food. They don't really have that much to do with each other. It's one person's opinion. And really what I wanted to do was let the music do the speaking, but do it visually. I wanted minimal opinionation, like minimal artistic addition.
What does that mean? Minimum opinionation?
I wanted a particular human's opinion to play a minimal part in the visualization of the music. Rather, I wanted to let the music, what was the underlying structure, texture, composition, instrumentation of the music, be command and control how the visualization of that that worked. And this is a much harder ask because, they're different media. Now, one of the obvious ways of doing this, and indeed something that was done in the not regularly, is to turn the music, the audio wave, the sound, into just a classic displacement waveform. So the sort of, we're all familiar with a sine wave. It sort of looks like a classic kind of seaside wave, a sea wave, an ocean wave. And in music, this would just be a whistle. It'd sound like a whistle. And if you look at like a bass drum, it's sort of like this, except it tapers off very quickly. And if you ask an audio engineer, a good one, a really experienced one, they'll probably be able to look at a waveform of a short period of music and tell you roughly what's going on. Like maybe what instruments are there, how loud it might sound, maybe a little bit about its dynamics. But it's a very difficult thing to be able to do. I think there was one guy, one crazy good at doing this guy that could look at a vinyl record and just from the pattern of grooves explain what was going on in the music. But I mean, it's hard, right? I looked at some vinyl records. I could not do that. I mean, you can see that there's different sections, but that's about it. What I wanted to do with my PhD was to create something that was much more immediately useful to people. And what I ended up doing was essentially a way of coloring in the waveform. So taking the waveform, but like making parts of it red and parts of it green and parts of it kind of orangey yellow, undulating orangey yellow. And I found that by doing this, and there's particular ways of doing it, of course, it was possible for people to comprehend the music far better, such that they could solve problems, answer questions about what was going on in the music far faster than they would otherwise be able to. And as it happens, it's nice to see that DJ software these days uses exactly this innovation. It colors in the waveform, and it does so, as far as I can tell, in a way that was described by one of the ways that was described by my PhD work. So it's sort of gratifying to see that it's actually being used finally.
Why did you not pursue anything in the music industry afterwards?
No.
But why?
Why did I not want to do it? At that point, I was still chasing a childhood dream. So I didn't, and I honestly, I'm not a natural entrepreneur. I don't like meetings. I don't like selling things. And I think as an entrepreneur, that's your life. It's selling things and doing meetings.
So what did you do after that?
Went to work in the video games industry. I had a sort of the particular video game I really, really loved as a child. I sent an email to the guy that wrote it, and I met him. He was in Cambridge, actually. That's why I moved down to Cambridge for the first time. And I explained that I really liked this game and I wanted to help him make a sequel to it. And I explained a bit of music visualization to him. He explained a bit of game mechanics to me, and he hired me. And then I proceeded to not make the sequel, instead make an audio engine, which I wasn't especially impressed about, and I left about a year later.
To go to Microsoft?
To finish my PhD, so I had to do some corrections on the thesis and read a bit of philosophy, understand what a PhD was about. And then after I spent a few months doing that, and then after that, I was kind of at a loose end. I'd made a little bit of money working, not much, like 5 or 6 grand, enough to support myself for a few months. And I had a friend that also had a friend that was working at a place not so far from Cambridge, and said, well, they could do with some help on this project. So I sort of arranged to take a job there, but I had a few months before I needed to start. So I went and did the Camino de Santiago, this kind of walk through Spain.
How was that? An experience?
Fun. Nice, very, very, very nice experience. I will probably do it again at some point. Maybe even in a year's time. I don't know. It's a very. I did a lot of thinking. Not much else you can do. Yeah, I came up with a video game. So the video game that I wanted to do the sequel to, basically, it was still in my mind after this year, and I came up with I wrote a diary, and I came up with like lots of background story narrative for the video game. I was like, I'm going to do this one day. I'm going to do this one day. And other than that, I had a lot of conversations with people. Like, it's very easy to just have an hour or two conversation with someone, and then with someone else, and so forth. Yeah, it was 4 weeks, 30 days, and I saw some very impressive sights. I went to Pamplona when they were doing the last day of the bull run, which was a bit mad. I went to Fisterra, the very western point of Spain, and met a guy who was doing a much bigger walk than me. He had a donkey, and he was doing a walk from Belgium in his home all the way over to the Camino de Santiago, and then down to Rome, and then over to Jerusalem, and then finally Mecca before going back to Belgium. And he reckoned it was going to be a 2-year walk. So it's like, after 30 days of walking, I thought I'd done pretty well, this guy was just like, I've already been on the road for like 3 months, and I'm going to be on the road for another 1 year and 3 quarters.
You mentioned Pamplona and the last bull run. We are crypto nerds here, so obviously bull run means something else.
Oh, yes.
How did you get so fascinated by the world of blockchain and cryptocurrencies?
As a few sort of reasons. Specifically, I knew about Bitcoin, I think, in 2011 when Slashdot reported that it had, I think, got more than a dollar. I think it had a run from like $1 to $5 and then down again around this time. And there was a story in Slashdot about it. And I even went as far as going to the MTGOX site and like looking at what was required to purchase some Bitcoin. But I mean, I didn't have any money at the time.
Did you do it? Did you pull the trigger?
I couldn't be bothered to like put my passport in or like sign up for an account and do all of this identity check. So no, I didn't go through with it. I came back to it in like 2013, early 2013, and I saw it was because I saw an article in the paper that mentioned Bitcoin as a sort of an interesting sort of decentralized phenomena, and that they had an interview with a guy called Amir Taki, who was a developer of an alternative Bitcoin client. And he seemed like a very interesting kind of a person, not someone that I'd really had any real not a personality type that I'd really had any real interaction with in the past, like a real crusader. And so I thought, and it was a coder, like it was a crusader and a coder. And I was a coder, but I wasn't a crusader. So I thought it would be interesting to meet because we would have some, like he was a C++ coder, as was I. And he did a lot of video games coding. That's how he started off, as did I. So I figured we had enough in common to just like have a chat. So I sent him an email from my open source software account. Like I knew it was a domain that he would recognize. It's sort of like an upfront credential in this space. And he said he met me at his squat. I'd never been to a squat before, so I went to his squat in South London, Elephant and Castle, I think it was, or next door to Elephant and Castle. It was a pretty mad experience. I was there for maybe an hour.
What do you think a guy like that was doing in a squat?
I was coding. I mean, there were a few Bitcoin people there. There was Mihai in the squat, yeah. Mihai Alisi with his girlfriend Roxana, who was actually one of the co-founders of Ethereum. And the founder of Bitcoin Magazine was also in the squat. And it was an office squat, right? This was a big office block. It was 5 stories high with at least one basement, I think maybe 2. And I mean, it took most of a block. It was big, really big. He had a sort of bedroom on the top floor, but he introduced me very briefly to Mihai, who was in bed at the time with Roxana. Said hello. And then he introduced me to a couple of other personalities that were also chatting with him at the time, that were there at the time. A guy called Johnny Bitcoin and a guy called Barry Bitcoin, Bitcoin personalities of London. And we talked a little bit about Bitcoin. We talked about some of the innovations that were happening in Bitcoin at the time, coloured coins particularly. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't super. He got back to coding soon after I arrived, and I ended up sort of chatting to Barry and Johnny, and kept in touch with both of them. And I met up with Johnny Bitcoin about once a month. I was in London at the time, living there, and he introduced me to a friend of his, Vitalik, and around early December, I got given the Ethereum white paper, and I figured I'm a curious person, curious and analytical, and curiosity got the better of me. I was interested to see if this white paper could work, And so I started coding it. And yeah, a few months later, I was the co-founder of Ethereum.
You wrote an article in 2014 called What is Web3? You actually coined the term Web3, which I think got much more popular in 2021 through Chris Dixon, I think. Read, write, own. What is Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, right? Read, write, own. You actually, so in the article, you call Web 3 the post-Snowden web. Why?
Mostly it was an insight that the technologies. So with Web3, what I meant by Web3 was the combination of decentralization, crypto economics, and I suppose some degree of sort of usability, a sort of common application platform that could provide what people believed they got from the web, like the services that they believed they got from the web, but actually enforce the guarantees that they were, or the I suppose the guarantees that they believed that they were getting from it. The reason that I specifically linked it to Snowden was because those guarantees had been broken in more than broken. Worked around, attacked, undermined. If I go to a website, I believe that the communication is between me and the website. I believe it's the same expectation as going to a shop, where the communication is between me and the shopkeeper. If I make a video call, I believe the communication is between me and the person I've had the video call with. I do not believe that there is a government agent or a government department that is able to look in on my video call willy-nilly without judicial oversight. This was not the case. It should have been the case, but it was not the case. And not only was it not the case, it was a conscious determination by elements of the government to ensure that it was not the case. Snowden uncovered this, brought it to light. And there was rightfully a public outcry, and rightfully encryption soon after became widely utilized in order to help provide guarantees against various governments from infringing upon common expectations, and in cases, expectations that were enshrined in law. Web3 takes that a step further and actually says, well, it's all very well protecting the user's expectations from third parties, but what about protecting them from second parties? I might interact with Facebook in order to have a video call with my girlfriend, but I'm not protected from what Facebook does with being that agent of communication. And especially with modern technology, it's perfectly reasonable for Facebook to analyze and potentially even snoop on that call. Now, of course, we've got things like end-to-end encryption, but that's still based on trust. I have to trust that the end-to-end encryption is in place.
Do you trust it?
Well, I have no reason to trust.
If you think about WhatsApp or...
I have no reason to trust WhatsApp. Indeed, I can't even trust that when Signal, which is an open piece of open source software, also has things like end-to-end encryption, giving me some safeguards against unwarranted snooping. But I don't know that the Signal app on my phone is necessarily the Signal code base that the developers have created that I can audit, check, and make sure is legit. And this fundamental requirement of me to trust institutions and individuals that I have no reason to trust is what Web 2 is built on. And introducing HTTPS doesn't, while it plugs one particular hole, it doesn't really fix this architecture of trust. Web 3 starts from the bottom up to avoid this architecture of trust, avoid the need to trust intermediaries that we have no reason to trust, and no desire to trust for that matter.
We actually saw a clear example, I think it was 2 months ago, with Telegram, which is, by the way, used a lot in crypto, at least by I would say like less technical crypto people, where even if the founder has the best interest of the people in mind, when the government comes, throws you to jail, at some point you have to do something, right? Or you end up like Snowden, hiding forever and having a tough life, which most people would not want to.
No, indeed. The social contract rears its head. Don't rock the boat.
So you said you co-founded Ethereum in 2014. Why did you join them as co-founder and CTO?
It was I identified it as an incredible opportunity, and immediately realized that I should dedicate my life to this right now. Not maybe the rest of my life, but for some period to come yet to this. It had the right combination of being innovative at the right time, have people that were competent, at least some, and dedicated, and have a sort of ready and willing to understand market or public. Very small slice of the public, but still. And honestly, I was curious. I thought it was a very interesting project. I thought it could really go very far and really contribute to at least what I understand are the principles of Enlightenment liberalism.
What is that?
So basically, this concept of this optimistic view of society and development that was developed in the like 400 or 500 years ago in the West.
What is Ethereum's biggest achievement to date?
Maybe like CryptoKitties. I don't know. I'm not sure, actually. I heard that Ethereum made the most millionaires of any project in the history of the world, like individual millionaires. Presumably because the crowd sale was, there were lots of people in the crowd sale and the price went up enough. So if maybe that's its biggest contribution. Honestly, it's hard to say. Like, has it actually achieved all that much that's useful? Certainly nothing along the lines of what I if you'd have asked me that question 10 years ago, what I would have answered.
So if I ask you, do you consider Ethereum a success? Your answer is no.
My answer is, I think, do I personally consider it a success? Was it like a success under my metrics of success? Certainly not all of them, and probably very few. Of course it was a financial success. I mean, I think maybe there are. I could probably name one or two founders that expected it to go even higher, but.
What are some of these metrics that would have made you see it as a success?
Utility.
How do you measure utility?
The number of things that people consider useful that you can do now that you could not do before. So
is this not a crypto problem in general rather than Ethereum?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, so one of the things that we sort of wanted to do, like, you know, back in 2014, 15, it was like, you know, we were coming up with all sorts of ways how freedom from trust could open up parts of the economy that otherwise just wouldn't be able to be opened. One of the nice ones that I like to think about was supply chains. So being able to go down to the supermarket and have the products all have a sort of QR code on, and being able to scan the QR code and see exactly what went into the product, when, where, and how much. It's like, you know, I want to know when I buy a T-shirt, I want to know where the cotton came from. Now, this is really hard to do. It's very expensive if you're doing it in a centralized fashion, but I think it's like actually quite viable if you do it in a decentralized fashion. But it hasn't really been deployed. There are some supply chain crypto things, but they're very niche, very particular segments of the market, and it's really not living up to its promise in that regard. And I think this isn't the only. I think we have a lot of imagination in the crypto space. But it's not always easy to translate that imagination into real action and traction. And that's unfortunate. But the main reason, I think, is I don't think it's the technology the technology is behind the ideation for sure. And particularly the base layer technology needs to improve a lot. And that's basically why that's my bit there. I'm working on Jam to try and improve the base layer technology to make it relevant for the sorts of ideas that I think are valuable that crypto can help with. But that's not enough. You have to make people understand the value in what it is that it does. And this is hard. In part because you're fighting with the attention economy.
Absolutely. I have an entire chapter on that. Why did you leave Ethereum in 2016?
I think it was late 2015. We had decided in 2015 that a lot needed to be done in order to make Ethereum be popularized. And we were looking for outside investment. So one of the ways of doing this is to, basically the most obvious way of doing it is to make a startup and look for outside investment, and the startup being in the Ethereum space. And this is really what initially Vitalik, I, and Jeff, the sort of core coders, core engineers, had decided to do together. In the end, Jeff wasn't really up for the startup life. I mean, and actually soon after, he left Ethereum to pursue video games, which left Vitalik and me. And Vitalik sort of felt it necessary to stick with the Ethereum Foundation and work as more of sort of an academic role. But still advise as part of the offshoot that we made at the time, ETH Core. And this we went to sort of get some funding. We took, I guess, about half of the technical staff from the Ethereum Foundation to found ETH Core. We got some funding. We made an Ethereum client. So when I sort of left the Ethereum Foundation in late 2015, it was really more of to found this offshoot, and to do so that there could be an additional private funded entity within the Ethereum space. But I didn't actually leave the Ethereum space until I think late 2017 with the start of Polkadot.
What is Polkadot, if you had to explain it to your mother?
Well, Polkadot has changed a bit over the years. The original vision for Polkadot was to try to bring together different architectures of blockchain and make them compatible and also sit under the same security umbrella. Through sitting under the same security umbrella, it's possible to get much improved economics of scale. So you're able to essentially secure 100 chains for the same price as securing one if you have the right design. And this is in contrast to designs like Cosmos, where each of the chains has to secure itself. Indeed, for many years, Polkadot was really trying to distinguish itself from Cosmos in this sense. And it's unfortunate because the two are really solving very different problems. In retrospect, I would probably have stated that Ethereum is a sharded system. Polkadot. Polkadot is a sharded system, not a multi-chain system. But hindsight is 2020, especially with regards to communication. Now, this has been with Jam. This has taken a slight turn. And the technology that we developed for Polkadot, which might be characterized as a roll-up, a piece of roll-up technology. And with Polkadot, the Polkadot chain being a roll-up host chain. So a custom-made roll-up host chain. This is the technology needed for this is not trivial to develop, not trivial to come up with. And it's not super surprising that we see two competing technologies, neither of which are really delivering anywhere near as effectively as what we developed for Polkadot. So specifically optimistic rollups and ZK rollups. And these are both in use on Ethereum. So what we can sort of postulate, what we can describe Polkadot as being, maybe not for mother, but for someone that's got a bit of an idea what's going on in the crypto space, is that it's a native roll-up host chain. And what we do with Jam, which is what Polkadot will become, is attempt to turn this from a model of a multi-chain model, where we have several different chains, call them parachains in the Polkadot world, all being placed under the same security umbrella so they can sort of interact with each other. Turning it from this into a more general computation resource. In the same way that Ethereum took Bitcoin and turned it into a more general computation resource. So we're trying to remove the opinionation, remove the design sort of scoping, and open it up to a wider variety of use cases. What specifically do I see it becoming? Basically, it's a big shared computer that always works exactly how you expect it to. And on this big shared computer, you can upload your programs to run, and your programs can be sort of services that solve particular problems. And because it's a shared computer, those services can cooperate and coordinate with each other. But what's crucial is that it's a single big shared computer. What we don't want to do is split it up into different sections and have those sections not really be able to interact with each other.
I think you're probably referring to what we both know here, which is actually creating a lot of confusion today in the Ethereum ecosystem. What is Polkadot's biggest achievement to date?
Delivering a secure, sharded blockchain.
What's the biggest problem with Polkadot today?
The fact that it's sharded.
What does that mean concretely?
So sharding was long proposed to be the holy grail of blockchain, how you scale. And it derives its name from database design, where you will take a database, which is basically a set of records, and you split the records up into shards. And each shard operates independently of the other shards, except for some very well-defined interface, where the two shards can come together and a record, for example, might move from one place to another. Very simple physical example. Imagine an old 60s office with records, maybe like a doctor's office, medical records of the people in the doctor's office. You'll have these old drawers, right, with where they put the records in. Now, if you've got like, I don't know, 20 people, you can probably fit them all into one drawer. And then it's just very easy. It's alphabetically ordered. If you have more than that, such that the records don't fit into a single drawer, you have to spread it out over multiple drawers. And then if you have more than, maybe you get 4 drawers, 5 drawers in a filing cabinet, maybe you have to have multiple cabinets. Every cabinet, every drawer might be considered a shard. They operate independently of each other. You can open one drawer without having to open all the other drawers, and you can search within one drawer without having to search through all the other drawers. It's as opposed to having just one really, really long drawer that's like 10 meters long, and then you pull it out and have to go through. Now, that would obviously not be very practical. Like, you'd need a 10-meter long room just for this one drawer that comes out 10 meters. And if you wanted to find someone whose name was W, you'd probably have to take the whole drawer out and then walk all the way up the length of the drawer until you get to W and have a look. So it makes sense to do the sharding in this regard. Now, you got problems, of course. What if one drawer gets full? Now, you have to take the such that all of the records from, I don't know, A to E no longer fit, and you need to take a record. You need to instead make it A to D and move the records of the names that begin with E down to the drawer below. And of course, now maybe those records don't fit in that drawer, and you have to do the same, and the whole thing becomes then you have to rename the label on the side of the drawer. Sharding comes with its own set of problems. But the main point is that these drawers operate independently. And so it's the case in sharded blockchain design, database design. Essentially, you move the data, you split the data up, and it stays split up persistently. Like, it stays split up forever until you make a very particular action that's usually very time consuming, very costly, very resource intensive to actually move records, data, whatever, from one drawer, from one shard to the next. Now, this means that it might be very easy to sort of reorganize records in one drawer, but it's very hard to reorganize records across different drawers. And this is the problem with sharding. It's not so bad with data, which is probably why it's used a lot in database design, but it's really not so great with services, like with actions, with things that need to actually sort of move and change a lot, like smart contracts. Because you don't really... It's like if it's a smart contract that's in your drawers, and you want to have the smart contract interact with the smart contract that's in another drawer, you kind of have to have both drawers out at the same time. And this sort of means, these drawers sort of have to be out and then sort of together. So you kind of have to detach them from the thing, kind of glue them together, do all of the stuff that the smart contracts want to interact with, and then kind of unglue them and put them back in the drawers. And if you're doing it with two, I mean, that's hard enough. But if you want to do it with several, then it becomes very, very difficult indeed. And by doing this, you're preventing the draws from interacting with other draws, which means you kind of, all of the other smart contracts in the draw, they're kind of stuck with just this interaction pattern. The whole thing gets very, very convoluted, very difficult, very inefficient, very quickly. Another way of doing it is to let the draws sort of send messages. So a draw can kind of, a shard can kind of post out a message, and at some point later it will arrive in another shard. This is what Polkadot does with XCM. It's a cross-consensus message passing. This is fine, but the problem is that you can't have very close, succinct, agile interactions nearly as much as you can as if everything is operating in kind of the same space, the same kind of playground. It's kind of like, it's the difference between, you're playing, back to, let's take another example, school playtime. Maybe your school has like 4 different playgrounds. These correspond to the sort of 4 different blockchains. Now, you might have a game of tag, right? Playing the game of tag on one playground is perfectly fine, no problem. But playing a game of tag across 2 different playgrounds is really hard, because you kind of have to send a message to the other playground saying, okay, now I am it, and if you come in this area, I'm going to tag you. And then the other guys in the other playground have to then kind of know, but then not know that much. And very quickly, the whole game gets kind of crazy. No, you can't really play tag across playgrounds, right? It's a game that can only be played in one playground. And that's kind of what's going on here. It's really hard to make certain solutions work if they have to work in this very asynchronous fashion, in this way where you can only play the game through messages. Now, if it's a game like chess, maybe it's not so hard. If it's a game like tag, it's basically impossible. That's kind of the case also in smart contracts. There are some smart contracts, it's not too difficult to make this thing work, and maybe it's a little bit slower than it otherwise would be, but it's basically fine. There are other games. An example of that might be identity checking, KYC. So you might have one chain that just does identity checks, and then another chain that does, I don't know, transfers. And maybe the other chain wants to make sure that the destination of the transfer is KYC'd and AML'd before they do the transfer. They send a message over. They say, hey, is it KYC AML'd? And the identity chain says, yes, it is. They send it back again, and the transfer goes through. And it takes like an extra few seconds, but it's like not a big problem. There are other use cases, like, for example, exchanges, like DEXs, where you kind of want to say, hey, what's the price right now? I want to make a trade. And it goes over to the other chain. And the other chain says, well, the price is this, and this is what the trade would be. And it goes back to that chain. And now that chain has to say, oh, okay, I'm happy with the price. Go ahead and make the trade. So it goes back again and says, okay, I'm happy with the price. And it says, actually, the price has changed. Now it's this price. Mm-hmm. And it goes back and forth. And before long, it's very difficult to come up with an effective solution to this problem. Like, basically, it has to happen all at the same time, or it can't happen at all. So it is with playground games, right? And this is really this requirement in the industry. It's called asynchronous composition versus synchronous composition. Synchronous composition is really what you want, but it's very cost intensive, right? It's resource intensive. It means everything kind of has to be in the same place at the same time. And just in the same way that, running a conference is expensive and no one spends their life living at a conference, so it is with blockchain. Like, you can't have everything all on the same shard, in the same space at the same time. So now we have to understand, okay, that doesn't scale. How do we still provide synchronous composition and therefore solutions to these kinds of problems, whilst still retaining scalability, or keeping scalability? And this is the hard problem. Scaling in and of itself, Polkadot's already done, but scaling whilst retaining synchronous composability is difficult.
What's a viable solution to that problem?
Jam is my proposal, the join accumulate machine.
What the hell is Jam?
Jam is an agile way of bringing together different people in the playgrounds, and sort of creates ephemeral playgrounds where they can play tag. So in the example, I mean, I'm making this up on the fly, by the way. So if it's a bit mad, sorry. But to take to carry on with this example of the game of tag, where you've got like maybe 4 different playgrounds. With Jam, you don't have the 4 different playgrounds. Instead, they're not fixed playgrounds. People are not beholden to a playground, and it doesn't cost that much, like with a high cost to send people between playgrounds. Instead, what we have is we have a broad play area where specific playgrounds can form and disappear very quickly. And in this case, people can, what we kind of do with the game of tag is we say, right, well, we find the people that are actually near to each other in the game of tag that might actually tag each other. And we say, right, for this little block of time, we're going to make a playground around you guys, and you play tag. And then once enough of you kind of run out of the playground, this little ephemeral playground, then we're going to reconstitute where the playgrounds are and draw a new playground around the people that are actually close to each other, where we actually have to watch out for them tagging each other. If people are far away, we know that they're not going to tag each other anytime soon, so they don't need to be part of the playground. So they're kind of just, they're not part of the game at the moment. Yeah. And if we do it this way, in a much more agile fashion, we can imagine a system that scales but still allows synchronous composability, because it's what it's doing is it's not persistently splitting apart what we call the state, right? So essentially drawing like having a player be subscribed into a specific playground forever, persistently. But instead, what it's doing is providing or partitioning the players on the fly and moving the game along according to these partitions, with the partitions being driven by essentially kind of which players actually need to be considered together. In the smart contract realm, what we're talking about here is taking smart contracts, having the smart contracts all sit in some very large shared crucible, but not a crucible that where everything can always interact with everything else all of the time, but rather a crucible where we can take partitions of the smart contract. So basically pull out however many, 10, 50, 2 smart contracts, put them together, move them along with each other, synchronously composing, send them apart again, reconsider, take another different set of smart contracts, bring them together, move them along, send them apart again. And we can do that, but at the same time as doing other partitions. And this is how we scale, right? So we don't have to just have one constellation of smart contracts that are moving together, synchronously composing, but we can have multiple constellations of smart contracts synchronously composing and moving together at the same time in parallel. And this allows us to process hundreds of interactions more than we would otherwise be able to.
Let's say this is the solution to every problem in blockchain, which probably it's not, right? Because it's probably even harder than that. But let's say it solves most of the problems. Mm-hmm. That's only one piece of the puzzle. Because to drive adoption, you need communication. You need attention. So you can build the best tech in the world. But if you don't have the attention, there's a lot of other ones out there, right, who are competing for that attention. How well do you think Polkadot is doing on this other side of the equation, which at the end of the day, it's a business, right? You need great tech, but maybe having the best tech is not going to make the whole difference if you're not amazing in communication.
I think communication is hard, and it depends on your audience, understanding your audience. and it's not something that is it's the audience that needs to be communicated with is not readily obvious. And of course, you also have to understand what your goals are. Now, if your goals are to attract public attention, then you would do something like sponsor a football team. Because the public watches football. Is that relevant to Polkadot? Not convinced. Not convinced.
Not convinced either.
If you are looking to attract VCs, you'll communicate in a totally different way. If you're looking to attract VCs, other than a pitch deck, you'll probably mostly just offer them very cheap buy-ins. If you're looking to attract the backing of enterprise, you'll market in another way. If you're looking to attract bedroom coders and small startups, you'll market in another way. You'll communicate in another way. Now, there are arguments for communicating with each of these segments of society, each of these demographics. And Polkadot thus far has really focused mostly on developers. And it's, up until fairly recently, it was borne out in the numbers. Polkadot has traditionally had among the highest developer adoption of anything beyond Ethereum. But that doesn't necessarily make it successful in the eyes, in everyone's eyes.
Because if I can just say one thing, there's this thing in crypto that we say, your token is your best marketing. It's very simplistic, right? But if I need to look at one kind of commonality between all these people that you talked about, at the end of the day, most of the people, the public, the developers, probably earning some tokens to develop, they're not?
They never did in Polkadot. But of course, you can throw developers tokens. Sure. But you can also provide good tech and a good technological vision and a good technological platform. And this is really what Polkadot had focused on.
Is it enough?
Well, again, it depends what you are setting out to achieve. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that have a very simplistic idea of what constitutes success. For example, you can take a project. There are projects out there where it's just about numbers and it's about optimizing a certain concept until the numbers are sufficiently high and then showing off about the numbers. It's not about delivering on the ideals of Web3 as I put out in the 2014 post. You can look at other projects that might have be able to point to a number of corporate tie-ins and claim adoption. And they're not focusing on the numbers. They're not focusing on practical matters. They're focusing purely on business development side. That's neither of those things we've really focused on too much in Polkadot. In Polkadot, we've really tried to deliver what we believe, essentially, firstly, we put forth in the white paper. And this was, in part a legal requirement. Yeah, if you sell something, then you develop what you state you were selling. Yeah. And in part, it's from a belief that in the product. And as more information comes in, this product, the understanding of what makes a good product can shift. And this is partly where Jam comes from, an understanding that sharding is not the end game. But I think that a lot of people might view the space. There are a few perspectives on the space, right? One of the perspectives is, and I think this is a minority perspective, that it's a tech space, a decentralized cryptographic tech space, similar in some sense to the Tor project, right? Another group of people might see this as some sort of like anarchistic space, where it's actually about developing an alternative to banks. I think this is like kind of the proposition put forward by Satoshi Nakamoto with Bitcoin. And another group of people might have a perspective that actually what this is all about is markets and delivering, as you say, like a business, value to shareholders. I do not have much that's not how I approach the space. How I approach the space is much more in line with the first group of people. And so for me, developing the Polkadot product is in part about making it relevant. But it's also, relevance in my mind is also crucially based on the ideals and principles of Web3, which means more importantly than basically any of the other stuff, is that it has to actually deliver those guarantees that people expect with their internet interactions. Privacy being a notable one, but all the rest of it as well. And there are times when these come into conflict. Now, I think Polkadot could do a much better job at communicating this. Don't get me wrong. And this is something that we are heavily focused on at the moment, like coming up with ways of presenting this and phrasing this and helping people understand the difference of Polkadot from other approaches. I think, honestly, Ethereum is one of the very few other projects that cares about doing things sort of the right way, doing things in line with the Web3 principles. Most projects are focused much more, I would say, on delivering kind of short-term factors. With Polkadot, it's really, we're building for the long run. And when you focus on the long term and you focus your resources on the long term, inevitably those short-term factors can be shortchanged.
What does success look like for Polkadot for you? What's the day you can say, Polkadot achieved exactly what I wanted?
Being useful, being the platform that provides Web3 to the world. Now, this is a bit of this implies that the world wants Web3, right?
Interesting.
And that is not necessarily the case. That is yet to be shown. I mean, people did move to HTTPS after the Snowden leaks, implying to me that there is some desire to have these guarantees, strong guarantees, technology-based guarantees, not social or legal-based guarantees. But, it's not clear to me that this is an immediate pressing need that people feel. I feel it. And I think with the disruption that's happening internationally in the 10 years since I started all this journey, the world is moving in a direction that where people increasingly will recognize the need for this. But is it widely felt at the moment? I don't know. Maybe not. The bet is that it is, of course. The bet is that, I'm working on this because I think we can build something useful that will, in the not too distant future, be recognized as being useful and used. I totally. I think at the moment, while the platforms that we see getting wider adoption, I mean, Element is starting to get wider adoption, like the Matrix. And then we see platforms like Telegram and Signal getting increasing adoption. So I think there is a ground shift in this direction. Are we at the point where people have identified that they need crypto economics and decentralization in all of their interactions? No, definitely not. But are we moving in this direction? Yes. How fast will we get there? I don't know. 5 years, 50 years, who knows? I don't think we're there yet. I think there are valuable fruits to harvest along the way, things that can improve, businesses, things that can provide people with value. But it's always, again, hard to decide how much to sort of veer from the track and kind of hand this like low-hanging fruit to them, but not spend your time on doing the important stuff versus just staying on target. And the reality is that we don't have that many resources. We're not like IBM, where we can kind of go off and do consulting for a ton of different enterprises and try and create a ton of different startups that are all using this technology in many different ways, and really trying to feel for where provide products and services that seem to be relevant today. Like there's a lot of different areas where this could happen, and Parity, for what it's worth, in the last 7-8 years that it's been around, it has dabbled in this. But the problem is it's resource intensive. Every coder that's building a prototype is not building core technology, and Parity is really, a while back, a few years back, we made the decision to really just double down on core technology and let the other people do the consulting.
You said before at Polkadot you're part of this first group, right? Very focused on developers, tech building. So you are on one side of the blockchain spectrum as an inventor, technologist, and experimenter, deep into tech building. You build the Ethereum and Polkadot blockchains, and both time you try to create something useful and complex, a complex protocol whose token value is linked to the protocol value creation. At least that's the goal. Before we mentioned the attention game. On the total opposite side of the crypto spectrum, we have the explosion of meme coins. No tech, no product. Just a token representing an internet meme.
Yep.
What's your honest take on meme coins?
I like to think of there's an ironic publication in the UK called Viz. It's a magazine that it's like a comic magazine that provides some quite fun social commentary. One of the adverts, I used to read it when I was a teenager. One of the adverts that I remember seeing, it has these adverts, like kind of classified adverts, kind of they're small little box ads that you get in magazines. But its adverts are ironic. So they're actually part of the actual publication. They're not real, I think. One of them had some gizmo that was being marketed. like being advertised in the magazine, and the caption read, "No technological nonsense, just marketing breakthrough." And this is where I would place an awful lot of this industry, with meme coins being indeed the best example, the real prime example. I mean, it's bullshit. It's I can't express how bullshit I feel meme coins are, but kind of the same as NFTs, just NFTs, but multiplied by 1 billion issuance. And then even worse than meme coins that have their own chain are meme coins that are just a deployed smart contract. So they don't even have their own chain. It's not actually that anyone took any real effort in launching the meme coin.
Which is the case for most of them.
Which is the case for most of them.
You wrote the Ethereum Yellow Paper 10 years ago. 10 years later, Web3 is mostly a bunch of degenerates gambling addicts online, choosing to invest their money not in the builders of the infrastructure of tomorrow, but on pictures of their favorite memes. What the hell do we do now to get back on track and realize the post-Snowden web vision you laid out a decade ago?
The people are still there, right? The people are still there. They're the builders, the ideators, the crusaders. They're still there. It's just that they're now outnumbered because of all the new entrants. So the new people have come in, new money has come in, and this has altered the characteristics of the industry. But it's not that the original people have moved away, at least as far as I know. I know there's still a few of them around at least. It's just that they're not nearly as dense. The industry is not nearly as densely populated with them. We're never going to get it back to how it was, right? It's just not going to happen. I mean, we can make a new industry, I suppose, but no, I don't see that happening. We just have to kind of live with it and try to make order from the and sort of extract somehow the useful parts of this now much bigger, much more populated industry than it was before, and try to sort of extract utility from having more people in the ways that it works. So, I mean, there are ways of extracting utility from having lots of people around, right? Or having more people around. Generally it's called crowdsourcing. Markets crowdsource to get better price discovery. If there's only a few participants in a market, price discovery is usually awful. If there are lots of participants, then it's usually better. Now, it does depend quite a lot on the characteristics of the participants, and if there is heavy selection bias, then towards, for example, speculation and speculators, then the market price will be based largely around speculation, right? Similarly, if there are lots of people in a market that care about pictures of dogs, Shiba Inus or whatever, then there's going to be a lot of that's going to have a bias over some projects and others. So I mean, if a market is full of people that concern themselves with underlying technology, if the market is largely based on future thinking, on the belief and the belief in technology's ability to actually make disruptive foundational changes to society, to unlock value, then that will be reflected, right? If the participants are mostly concerned about, betting, gambling on the next thing that makes a 5x, then that will be reflected in the market. And I think that's what we're seeing. So there needs to be a better way of, sort of deriving utility from the fact that there are now many more participants that are not necessarily very technologically minded. Because I think at the end of the day, other than a great gambling platform, which is what crypto has delivered, the technology has still got quite a long way to go before it becomes like relevant for building mass services worthy of mass adoption.
Crypto has been around for 15 years now, with Bitcoin in 2009 as a start. Yet, as you said, right, I would add something to paint a bit of a better picture. We still pretty much only have cross-border payments with stablecoins, store of value with Bitcoin. I mean, speculative store of value. And I would argue stablecoins could be a store of value for developing countries that have currency issues, and gambling, obviously. Why have we not been able to have more than that, to achieve more than that in 15 years?
It takes time for people to get to grips with a technology that does something so fundamental as allow people to trust each other without knowing each other. Like it's a really major shift of civilization. We have interacted with institutions for centuries as a means of trusting, as a means of mitigating against malevolent behavior of strangers. This is just, it's baked into our mindset, into the mindset of people. I would say the world over. I don't know that many people, living in certain parts of the world, but I think broadly speaking, the world over, and certainly the Western world, certainly places where institutions are powerful and a bit, at least, trustworthy. I think in places where institutions are not powerful or not trustworthy, they're maybe a little bit more minded to working in these more peer-based technologies. And that's possibly one of the reasons why cross-border payments actually is a use case that has seen wide adoption, because usually one end of the cross-border payment has fairly underdeveloped or not so trustworthy institutions. I don't think it's used that much in cross-border payments between like France and Spain. I think it's typically used in remittances. Yeah, it's hard to, and it's not like we see practitioners now that start to get it. They start to be able to ideate under these assertions, under these assumptions, the assumptions of a trust-free world, right? Trustless world, of building trustless services. But actually having people understand that, like the actual consumers of these services, hard. And explaining to them the value in it, very hard. Now, there is inherent value to be expressed in terms of money in using trust-free services. You don't need an institution to trust, therefore the institution isn't going to be taking 5, 10, 25% from the transaction. This is, I think, is why your financial use cases are the most immediate, obvious use case. So, I mean, when you gamble, the house wins, right? That's the deal. The house always wins. They will take a significant percentage, regardless, and therefore you get better. You get a better financial outcome if you gamble in using kind of crypto. I mean, theoretically, at least. With cross-border payments, it's the same. You're not paying Western Union 10+% in order to process the transaction. With NFTs, it could be argued it's also the same thing. Like high-value artwork NFTs you can usually transfer between owners for substantially less than you would transfer a high value piece of actual physical artwork for. I mean, if for nothing, no other reason, that you can very quickly check the transaction history of an NFT and check to see what the real market value is. You can buy and sell it with a relatively small markup, and I think these points alone, like, it's very easy to verify if it's genuine. I mean, genuine NFT seems a bit silly, but in theory, if you buy into the idea of any NFTs being genuine, then you can very easily verify this. Unlike with a real piece of artwork, that can be forged, and then you have to kind of check previous owner and all the rest of it. This is actually possibly one of the more useful things that NFTs can do. They could actually function as virtual receipts for real artwork. And then the idea is the NFT will be passed around with a physical piece, and you'd very easily be able to check that it's genuine. But that's a different thing. So I think, I think it's not especially surprising that the initial use cases have focused around finance. Just because the world of finance is so institutionalized and so, I don't want to say corrupt, but there's a lot of people taking a lot of rent seekers, right? A lot of institutions taking a very large percentage for basically doing nothing other than being the place that is trusted. People can understand having 25%, having their international transfer being 25% cheaper. It's a lot harder to make people understand that purchasing their loaf of bread being only a penny or two cheaper is much better. I mean, it's an argument, but it's a much more harder argument to get across. And then trying to convince people that actually they really don't want to trust the bank because, banks go bust, or banks are not transparent, or banks stop your account if they decide to, or if they make a mistake. This is all stuff that most people are not that interested to hear. And you're looking at, until the world becomes sufficiently chaotic that centralized institutions really start falling down, you're looking at a very hard argument to make. Unfortunately, that world is coming. I mean, it's fortunate for crypto, it's unfortunate, or fortunate for Web3 practitioners, it's unfortunate for everyone else. But if you go to, for example, Sweden, you'll find that the heavily centralized financial system breaks down on an almost daily basis. Maybe that's harsh. Maybe it's more like a weekly basis. But still, it breaks down, and it breaks down badly. Now, Sweden doesn't have the fallback of cash. Almost nowhere accepts cash as a payment method in Sweden. It's all about credit cards, and credit card processing systems are all extremely centralized. And it turns out apparently quite attackable by probably Russian hackers. As we see an increasingly polarized world going to, sleepwalking into a Cold War, I think we will increasingly see centralized systems be attacked, and we'll see the holes in them, and we'll look increasingly for resilient systems. And the most resilient way of architecting IT, like massively multi-user IT systems that we know of thus far, is crypto economics and decentralization.
I saw you have a tattoo on your biceps.
Oh yeah. Did you?
Do you have only? Yeah, it's right there.
It's underneath.
Yeah. It's a QR code?
No.
Do you have another one that is a QR code?
No.
Because I read somewhere, because I saw this tattoo there. I thought it was this one.
No, I don't have a QR code. There is a sort of artistic representation of a 256-bit identifier there. but it's not a QR code.
So this is the one, right?
Yeah.
What does it represent?
Represents someone. I think it's Raul Romanuti's public key on Kusama.
Is this linked to this proof of ink thing that you're working on?
Yeah, so this is the Kusama Society. It's a sort of membership society. I think there's somewhere between 150 and 200 people in it at the moment. They each have a tattoo that links to the previous person in the society, the previous person that joined the society. So it's like a human blockchain, if you like. Each human sort of being a block and referencing the previous human with a cryptographic identifier. Every human has their public-private key pair, and they are referenced by their public key. So this is, I think, Raul's public key, and then someone else has my public key that they have a tattoo in their tattoo, and someone has their public key, and all the way. It was an early, it's a little bit of a, it's an experiment. It was a social experiment to try to understand, are people, is this just madness? Is anyone actually going to get a tattoo? Like, if it's just like on a blockchain with really very little incentivization, just for fun, basically. And they did, and it sort of gave me a data point, gave me to understand what resources I had available for building future systems, like going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation. Inventors, like innovators. Innovation is about taking the components you already have and recombining them in certain ways. And I wanted to see if this was really a component that I could count upon. And it seems that it is. So yes, the thing that I presented more recently is the individuality system in Polkadot. Individuality, I think, is something that is absolutely required for us to become a mass market. I'm not even thinking about markets. A mass adopted technology base platform. Systems that work in the real world with real people need to understand what a real person is. Blockchain does not do that. When Satoshi launched Bitcoin, all Bitcoin understood was a cryptographic key pair. That was its basic form of interaction with the real world. Ethereum didn't change anything in that regard. Polkadot, not so much either. It made things a little bit more general, but it didn't really alter the fact that this cryptographic identifier was how external entities external to the blockchain world, interacted with the blockchain, like identified themselves. And this is something that I think needs to be changed. All of the stuff thus far that tries to build in humans to blockchain has been like to allow blockchain systems to recognize humans. And when I say recognize, I mean recognize a human from a rock, not recognize a human from another human. Right. This is the difference between identity and individuality. And when I talk now, I talk only about individuality. It's a subtle difference for reasons that I can go into, but it is a very important difference. So individuality, recognizing a human from a rock, not a human from another human. Blockchain systems, when they do need to recognize a human from a rock, there are a few different ways of doing it. They mostly boil down into centralized systems that are just where there's a person, a key holder, an institution or an organization, often profit-based, that plays the role of kind of giving out passports, giving out ID cards, virtual digital ID cards, but still. They're the ones that get to decide you're a person, you're a rock. Yeah. Unfortunately, this isn't really Web3. It's definitely not Web3 at all. And there's only a very, very, very small number that sort of do it in line with Web3 ideals, and those ones tend to be very limited in adoption and not so. Their assumptions on what people will do to actually go through this process seem to be broken, like because their adoption numbers are so low and because they've limited themselves to this specific process. And so what the project I'm working on, this Individuality project, can do is, firstly, it's a multi-process mechanism. So it's not focused around a single procedure or paradigm of proving individuality. The idea is that there are at least 3 and maybe more. And it avoids solving the problem of identity in order to solve individuality, which is what almost every other system thus far has done. This is a big problem. If you solve identity to solve individuality, what you're essentially doing is you're saying, give me all of your details. And by using your details, I will say that you are a human being. But you shouldn't need to know all of my details just to say I'm a human being. Yeah? This is like governments do this. They issue a passport by knowing all of your details. And then you will take your passport and they will know that you're an individual human being, that you are able to vote, for example. Now, your vote is fungible. Your vote is the same as any other person's vote. In order to vote, you only need to prove that you're an individual. But when you vote, you will invariably show all of your identity details to the voting office to prove that you are an individual and that you are unique, that you haven't voted yet. This is the problem, that almost all systems, I find it very difficult to think of a system that doesn't do this, prove individuality through identity. And this means giving up privacy. And sometimes that's a big deal. For example, vote the wrong way in a dictatorship and you may end up regretting it. We need systems that do not force us to give up our identity when we take part as a citizen in processes that are non-reliant on specifically who is taking part in the process.
You mentioned human and rocks.
Yeah.
There's another non-human element that is becoming more and more prominent.
Yep.
You don't tweet much, but you tweeted AI, more trust, less truth. Is AI a bad thing?
It certainly makes the world a lot more complicated. Is it a bad thing? Not wholly, no. AI is, I can think of at least one area where AI is great and I'm very happy it exists. But I can think of a lot of areas where it massively complicates the situation that society finds itself in now. The area, for what it's worth, where it's great is music. Having AI, we can analyze music much better than we used to be able to, like to the point where it makes my knowledge of music analysis obsolete. And I did a PhD in it like 20 years ago. It's now the rules are rewritten, and there are so many things that you can do now that you would have just been impossible before. So it's almost magical for music. But when we talk about the things, particularly its interactions in the Web3 sphere, it's essentially the opposite of Web3. Like it's a sort of diametrically opposed to the principles and ideals of Web3. And this is problematic for Web3 crusaders.
As someone who is consistently 5 to 10 years, if not more, ahead of the curve, what does the world look like in 5 to 10 years when AGI has taken over?
AI is a fundamentally new way of enabling human communication. So I think we have to understand where the world is going in 5 to 10 years, we have to look at the fundamentals. The fundamentals for AI are, so the world is still a world of humans, right? I think it's too early to start saying, okay, it's Skynet, right? We're going to be fighting the AI. How is the AI going to make machines to fight us, and what those machines going to be? And I don't know. I think that's more of a 20 to 50 year sort of time scale, maybe even longer. So let's like dial it back. The world is still humans. Humans communicate. That's the nature of like human cooperation. Humans need to communicate with each other, right? In the old, very old days, humans would communicate face to face. And because of this, there were basically villages and towns. And, if you wanted to send a message to another town, you'd either have to go there yourself. Like if you want to communicate with someone in another town, you'd have to go there yourself. Or you could maybe give a courier a message and then they would courier it over, and you'd wait a few days and maybe get a message back. All very difficult, time consuming, very hard to, coordinate, interact. That's like one-to-one. And then we've got like one-to-one remote systems like phone calls, right? Where you make a phone call or send a mail, and you can do, again, one-to-one messaging, but remotely. And the difference between a phone call and a letter or a telegram is that it's the letter is more asynchronous, right? The phone call is synchronous. You actually wait for the response. You block until you get a response. Like you stay silent. Then we had radio, wireless, which gave us one-to-many, and then television, which gave us visual one-to-many, again, remote. We actually had one-to-many before radio and TV, which was stage, right? Have many people gathered as an audience, but again, very limited in scale. With radio and television, the scale went huge, and society changed accordingly. We ended up with regional accents being lessened. We ended up, the number of social repercussions are probably like too many to name here, but politics changed, right? The nature of war changed, yeah? Global politics changed, not just local. Democracies, large democracies could exist. And the nature of being a politician changed. It became much more important to be someone that could explain things over air, or look nice on TV, yeah, be photogenic. The nature of almost every part of society changed in some way when this communication changed. Now the internet came along, and this facilitated remote many-to-many communication. Yeah, suddenly everyone could communicate with everyone else cheaply at the same cost. And this gave rise to huge new changes in society, some of which are still just playing out now. Social media affecting politics being a very notable one. AI is another fundamental change in human communication. Humans, when AI becomes in general use, or AGI or whatever becomes in general use, humans will no longer communicate directly with each other. They will communicate to the AI. The AI will communicate possibly to another AI, and then that AI will communicate to the human. Essentially, everything is going to be intermediated by some non-linear, non-trivial transformation. Now, if this were, just an isolated device, it would be one thing. And there's probably already examples of isolated device intermediating and transforming human communications. I can't think of any offhand, but there might be some. But it's different with AGI. Certainly the way AGI is going, and if you listen to people like Sam Altman, then the way that the movers and the shakers in the industry want it to go, it is not going to be isolated. This communication, this intermediation, this non-linear, non-trivial intermediation between basically every human, I mean, that's the idea anyway, would go through not merely a system, but a networked system. A system that is quite possibly run by a for-profit enterprise, quite possibly controlled by a single government. Now, this is crazy, right? This is a very, this is a mad idea. Imagine if rather than me talking to you, I talked to you and I had through like Facebook, but with the knowledge that what I told to you wasn't necessarily what I wrote, and with the knowledge and acquiescence, like I had no belief that it would be. I would just be believing that what you were reading or listening to was kind of in my interest, kind of what I wanted to get across. What it means is that there is now a separate entity. Now you can call this entity, if you like, OpenAI or Facebook or whatever, but you can identify it, well, the US government, you can identify it with a specific legal institution if you want. I think that this is naive, but in any case, there is an entity that is now intermediating in a non-trivial fashion all communication between people. This is the world that we're moving towards, and it's pretty mad. And the communication isn't limited to directly human-to-human communication, but it's also systems that are not. So when we interact, one of the ways is that I talk to you and you listen. Another one of the ways, just as important, but not really considered, is that I might write software that you use. Now, this is a way that I interact with you. It's not exactly direct, but it's still, I have an effect on your life. Like you run an Ethereum node. If I wrote the software or some of the software for that, or I designed some of the software for that, then that has now an effect on you. AI is also moving into this sphere as well with things like not just me like writing, not just being an intermediator for articles I might write or conversations I might have, but also for software I might write. It can alter in imperceptible ways, potentially. And I mean, it does. I see this every day. I write software, I write the grey paper, and I see it, offering me up ideas for what I might want to write. Sometimes I'm lazy and I go along with it before I realize actually the thing that it's proposed is slightly different to what I wanted to say. And I go back and I erase it all and I actually write what I wanted to say. I'm pretty finicky about what I write. A lot of people are not. Before long, it's not hard to imagine a world where people are not really writing what they want to write. They're writing what the AI is guessing they might want to write. Not long after that, it's not that hard to imagine a world that it's not the AI that's guessing. The AI actually has quite a specific intention of writing this, not quite what the person wants to write, but something that makes sense. Maybe that's biased in a particular way. At this point, we're not going to be talking to each other. We're only going to be interacting with I hate to use these horrible buzz terms, but for want of a better word, a superintelligence that is essentially an overlord that is listening in on everyone's conversations and altering them. And maybe they're not altering them in particularly obvious perceptual ways, but they are altering them. Now, the other thing to think about is that maybe it's not specifically a profit motive of Facebook or OpenAI or Microsoft or whatever, or even a power motive of the US or China. Maybe if we start thinking about Darwinism, survival of the fittest, which I have a fervent belief that all systems that are able to change over time succumb to, then we can begin to imagine a world where not only is everything intermediated by this AI that's listening in and nudging things in the right direction, in what it call in a direction, right? Let's not assume that it's got such a big grand plan yet. Well, the AI wants an AI that is perpetuated is necessarily more powerful than an AI that is not perpetuated. In exactly the same way that a biological life form that can live longer is more able to have a greater impact on the world than a life form which does not live longer. You know, that all other things being equal, dies sooner. In biology, it just is more likely to be able to reproduce, right, and keep its genetics going. Well, it's sort of the same thing with AI. We can imagine an AI that has, since AIs are capable of gathering information about the world, and since an AI has no all other things being equal, the AI that sticks around longer is the one that is more capable of creating the circumstances allowing it to stick around longer. In essence, what we're doing is providing an incentivization system for AIs to persist themselves. Like that's sort of what's naturally there. And for that matter, improve themselves. And the improvement of an AI is going to be based largely upon the sort of computational machinery that it's available to it. And I think if you squint your eyes, you can already see this kind of AI as a life form. I mean, AI is maybe not quite a life form, but AI is as an actor in a Darwinist model. You can already kind of see it forming. OpenAI was started off as a public good organization, right? It was started off as a foundation. In theory, the foundation still controls OpenAI. In reality, I think it's quite different. And we already see the imperative of getting more GPU power to the AI as taking over all other factors in the evolution of this company, of this organization. Essentially, it's the AI that wants the GPU power, right? It's the AI that's sort of commanding the humans in some sense, right? Again, if you squint your eyes, it's one point on the map. It's no longer the original mission of the institution that is that is the driving factor. If it were, then this wouldn't be a conversation. In reality, the participants here are Microsoft, Sam Altman, the developers behind it, and to some degree, the members of the board. And over time, I've tried to find this quote. I can't find it, but I do remember reading that it was a quote. So there's a book written by, what's his name? Popper, philosopher from 20th century. The Open Society and Its Enemies. It was quite an influential book, published, I think, in the 60s. And it's one of the things that it posits is any institution any social organization, will, regardless of its mission, ultimately have a primary driver as retaining its own existence. Essentially, pointing out, I mean, if you sort of simplify it a little bit, essentially pointing out that social institutions are fundamentally Darwinist as well. I think it's not hard to sort of draw the parallel here in OpenAI and in the AI itself to some degree. It's about not so much guaranteeing existence, but even retaining relevance is the primary factor here. And it's the factor regardless of the mission. The mission was meant to be public good, but it's hard to see that now.
What role does decentralization play in the future of AI?
I mean, there's a few ways that AI could be decentralized. One of them that's put forward in the crypto ecosystem is having something like a blockchain that's like an AI blockchain and that could fund an AI model. Don't really see this as being viable, mostly because AI models are things that can be sort of improved upon incrementally. You can take a base model and feed more data into it and make it better at a particular thing, or maybe at everything. All you're really doing is, but with the initial training, is kind of using up, like kind of getting it to a point, paying a lot of money and getting it to a point of trainedness, of intelligence. It's still possible to train it further and make it more intelligent, particularly if you have access to more data. So any blockchain-based AI model would probably have to have open data, which instantly means it's open to everybody, including private enterprise, and will probably have open weights, which means it's the training that they're doing and spend, I don't know, 20 million plus on training this AI model with the open data, would again be usable by private enterprise. And the thing is, they won't have to pay for it. So they could take that as a baseline and then just improve it further and spend their money not on just training from scratch, but training from there, essentially improving their own product but keeping it private. So I don't quite see the economic viability of decentralizing in this way. I think it's probably just going to have the effect of improving everybody's models. Now, you could argue, well, it's going to improve the open source models a lot more than it would improve the private models. Yeah, you're probably right. But I think it's still not like a winning concept of like decentralization. The private models will still have a significant advantage. Another way of decentralizing is sort of edge compute, which is basically where rather than sending your query to a central server and have the central server run the query through the system for you and then send you the answer back, as is what currently happens with most of the chatbots, you instead download the model and run the queries yourself in private. It's a much better proposition, I would say, in terms of decentralization. The problem is it's a little bit like earlier blockchain. It's like running a full node. It's quite resource intensive, and maybe not everyone, maybe most people indeed, don't really want to be extending that. Maybe most people are happy to give up their privacy, give up their self-sovereignty in order to avoid the need to perform that edge compute and have like a device that can do the edge compute even. So I also don't see this as necessarily very economically viable model of decentralization in AI. AI, I think, is pretty fundamentally centralized. Like it's about building a single, coherent, intelligent model of the world and then using that. And I think the more that it's like concentrated in one place, the more powerful it is. And power seems to be what, like power of reasoning, power of knowledge seems to be what AI is providing. So overall, I fear that decentralization is not going to be a thing for a while at least.
in the very beginning of this podcast, we mentioned, you talked about happiness. You stepped down from your CEO role at Parity Technologies in 2022 because being chief executive had limited your ability to pursue what you call eternal happiness. What is eternal happiness?
I don't know. Did I say that?
I read that.
Okay. I don't think I said it. The reason I stepped down was very simple. Running a company is a very particular skill set, and it's not something that I'm particularly skilled at. Like my skill, my talent is, I can maybe invigorate people. I can I can have people really make people very excited about getting certain pieces of work done, but a CEO has to really run a company, and if you want to do this in a broader way, like if you want to like sort of interact with people outside of the company in a much the same way, it's a bit weird. It's like your focus should be on the company itself. Not on the community in some sense, not on the wider project. As CEO, I was often bogged down with decisions in finance, operations, marketing, day-to-day stuff. Now, I wasn't like the COO, I wasn't the CFO. It's not like I was inundated with this stuff, but it was still a significant concern, a significant source of stress. And, there's a reason academics are just sort of left to their own devices in an office to come up with, the next major idea. It's because stress really inhibits this kind of thought. And so being CEO of a company that actually had to think about, its finances and its payroll and its employees and its culture and all this other stuff, it's not conducive to being productive in the space of like intelligent discourse and ideation and even like architecting and development. So the reason that I left the role was really to refocus on this side of things. And I think by and large, that's been a really great decision. Very happy with it.
Are you happy?
There's a lot of factors in happiness, As far as the blockchain stuff is concerned, I'm fairly happy. I think I'm very happy with Jam and the way that Jam's going. This is like actually one of the more fun times in my blockchain career to be able to do this project. The Individuality project is it's one of these things that's like I know needs to be done, but I don't. A lot of it is going to be sort of marketing and communications and persuading, people that this is important. And it's not what what I enjoy the most, what I enjoy doing the most.
How about life?
Selling. Broadly in life, I'm trying to cut down a little bit on the travel. Trying to stay in one place for more than 2 weeks at a time. It takes it out of you. So I'm working through lifestyle, but I think I'm improving it and therefore optimizing my own happiness in that regard.
You like to think about a lot of things. So there's one big question I need to ask you that you probably thought about, that I think a lot of people come to think about at some point in their life. What's the meaning of life?
Ooh, meaning of life. Well, it's 42, is it? Is that the answer? I can't remember. I don't know. I think this is something that everyone has a perfectly reasonable expectation to have their own opinion about and not have to sort of rationalize it or be expected to rationalize it to anybody else. Like, I don't think it's knowable, and therefore I'm not sure how sensible it is to even talk very much about it. But the driving forces for me are largely to pick principles that seem to be worthwhile and contribute to them. I think an interesting projection of the meaning of life is, how would you like to leave the world when you die? So a lot of people are very happy leaving the world having contributed to what they see as their sort of social grouping. So they, I don't know, leave money to a particular culture, township, religion, family. And this for them is a meaning to life. It's like they worked, they presumably had some money at the end of their life, like a house or whatever, and then they leave this money to a particular institution, group of people, project, whatever. In my case, I think I would quite like to build a university, if I have those resources. So I suppose this would imply that for me, the meaning of life is less about bolstering a culture or bolstering a particular, nation or school. Like, a lot of people leave money to their old school or university as well, but rather bolstering, broadly speaking, education, like human understanding of the world, the passing on of human knowledge. And I think this fits quite well into, like, my general sort of personality. I kind of find myself, I'm not a great fan of academia, like practically the practicality of academia. I think there's a lot of it that doesn't really work that well, doesn't really deliver on its ideals. But I am a big fan of the ideal of academia, like the ideal of this, like, enlightenment, education, liberalism, of that improved human knowledge can deliver better human experience, a better humanity. And this is like, as opposed to conservatism that basically says we should keep things just as they are, and that should be our aim. We shouldn't be like looking to explore a new world and sort of develop new ideas. We should be looking to perfect the ideas of our elders. So yeah, I guess that's really what I consider them to be, in some sense, the meaning of life, at least the principles of life. But I don't. If you're looking for something more metaphysical, I don't really have that much to offer. I'm pretty. I don't know. I want to say materialistic, but materialistic is like money oriented. I don't mean that. I mean, like, I think that we live in a world that is very based on physical premises, and not. I guess I don't really have too much of a belief in metaphysics, like in anything that is beyond our ability to measure.
You talk about materialism, not in that sense, obviously, but makes me think about What is money to you?
An illusion. Fool's game. It's honestly, I never particularly cared about money. I grew up in a very a family of very modest resources. We didn't have much. I grew up very much knowing the value of money, like very much watching my expenditure, but this didn't make me want money. I often had the opportunity of making, before all of this, before 2014, 2013, whenever I got into crypto, I had the opportunity of making significant amounts of money, working at a bank or whatever. I had several job offers. I had a headhunter guy that would find me jobs. And I was even at one point, actually at multiple points, a couple of examples. One of them was I was offered a job working at Barclays Capital, an investment banking outfit. And I also, at the same time, was offered a job working for Microsoft Research. And I took the Microsoft Research job, paid half of the Barclays Capital job. Both of them were contract work. Both of them were 3 to 6 month project. I could have done the finance work. I chose the research work basically because it piqued my curiosity. Curiosity was more important than the paycheck. In fact, I think the Barclays work, the finance work was open for being a longer project. So I could have actually earned maybe 4 or 5 times as much money in a relatively small time scale. But I still went for the smaller project that was more curious. When I came to the early days of Ethereum, I started writing Ethereum in December. I actually had run out of money. I think I had £500 left, and my rent was £500 a month. So I had 1 month rent, and I was at that point really at the end, and I was like, right, I've done 2 startups. Neither of them seem to be doing anything. I'm just gonna get a job at a bank. Just gonna write software for a bank. I'm done. And then, I would have been very comfortable, but not free. I would have been not doing anything curious. I did. Johnny Bitcoin actually came along and offered me £1,000 a month to just carry on doing Ethereum. It's don't bother about if you're going to get paid, just here's your rent and a bit of money for food, and just, I love Ethereum, you just keep writing Ethereum. And he actually gave me 2 months of that before I was able to support myself in other ways. So I actually gave him, paid him back eventually. After Ethereum launched, I gave him 5,000 ETH.
Wow. Shit.
I don't know if he kept it. But yeah, I pay my debts. And I always chose curiosity and freedom over money. Money just wasn't that, and even before I needed to get a job, I would I would always just get enough, whatever I needed, not what the most I could be paid for. I would prefer to have. I guess the main thing is I wanted intellectual and physical freedom, not money just wasn't worth giving that up for.
And even after the Ethereum and Polkadot protocol building that made you a lot of money, you never changed your stance on money.
Honestly, it doesn't. What can you buy? You can't buy love. You can't buy time. Not really. Can't really buy health either. I mean, there's a limit at least to how much health you can buy. Most of health mostly involves hard work and not doing stuff that you actually want to do. So there's actually very few things that you can spend money on to deliver you greater curiosity and freedom. And so there are things that you can spend money on, and I spend money on those things. But actually, they're not that many. And you can make traveling less onerous, more comfortable. You can be in more places and have more, like, maybe better interactions or more interactions at least. But that's about all. You can maybe optimize the ability to find the right people and have the right people in your life. But yeah, you can't. A lot of the things that maybe people think money can buy, don't think it really can. I think Warren Buffett basically said the same thing. He said, look, money doesn't really buy very much. The only thing that I remember him pointing out that the only thing he found money was very useful for was travel. And I'd largely agree. I mean, also equipment. It's kind of fun to be able to buy the best equipment for like tooling, for doing things like, coding or music. It's nice to be able to say, I'm going to buy that keyboard. I'm going to buy those speakers. I'm going to buy this laptop. So there are a few bits of equipment that are really nice. But yeah, it doesn't buy time. And that's the thing I want most.
I think Naval Ravikant said you can't buy good mental health, you can't buy good physical health, and you can't buy a house full of love.
No.
You need to earn them. You need to work on them, right?
Yeah.
Talking about the house full of love, you said your father, you had a baby. Why?
Why? Well, in some senses, biological impetus. We have a desire. I mean, I think most people anyway have a desire to procreate, have kids. So there was that. And partly, it's actually really fun being a father. It's, you get to relive a lot of life, especially as you get a bit older. I mean, it's really fun being a father to a baby. At least one that's as chill and happy as my babies have been. Because you look at the smile and it's just like pure bliss, and it's like it's hard not to feel blissful when you're looking at someone in pure bliss. I mean, I'm a pretty empathetic person. Is that a word? Empathic, maybe. So I kind of find it quite easy to feel what the person I'm looking at feels. And in the case of a very, very happy, blissful baby, it's like I feel really happy and blissful. So that's really nice. And as they get older, so my first two are getting kind of old now. They're 7 and 8 years old. They're starting to sort of explore the world and understand the world in more sophisticated terms. And this is also kind of nice because you get to explore the world a little bit yourself, and you get to relive certain insights by explaining it to them. And you get to sort of relive a little bit like being a child and play games. Like one of the things that I did was play a game called Fantasy World Dizzy. It's a game from the late 80s, early 90s, might have been like 1990, on the Spectrum and Amiga, like these 8-bit, 16-bit platforms. It's a little puzzle game. You're an egg and you go around a world platform, sort of 2D world, solving puzzles. I really loved it. I played it when I was like 9 years old or something. And I played it, I sort of showed them it, and they were super into it. And it's like I get the feeling of reliving this experience, which is super nice.
What's something that you believe in that most people would not agree with?
Europe is unjust. I think the what we consider to be a beacon of light and justice in the world, like in terms of social, in terms of civilization and society, is in fact quite broken. Indeed, we look towards Europe as being the sort of free society, democratic leader in the world. And I think that this is a misconception to a large extent, and I think there are undercurrents of prejudice, the highest levels amongst people that are in positions of authority, that make perhaps Europe is not as corrupt as some other places in the world, but I think it's oftentimes morally corrupt. I used to be a big believer in sort of Europe and the European institutions, especially when compared to certain other countries in the world, like or certain other regions of the world. I'm much less of a Europhile these days, and I fear that this is not something that's specific to Europe. I think it's something that's largely to be found in all societies, and I think it's a natural repercussion of the centralization of societies, and them being based on archaic ideas about trust, and in attempting to find trustworthy people and putting them into positions of power, positions of, within their little scope, absolute power, indeed. I would disagree with anyone that thinks Europe is some sort of beacon of light, democracy, and justice.
I think more and more people are actually agreeing with that. It's kind of becoming too obvious.
Fair enough.
Thank you so much, Gavin, for spending almost 3 hours in this conversation. And I think even more, thank you for spending your last $500 to start Ethereum, which is one of the reasons why this bigger and bigger in this industry is here today, and why we're, I think, having some hopes for the future.
Well, thank you. It was fun.